Welcome back. We're still here. This is Good Morning Namibia. It is the 7th Africa Sanitation Conference coming to you from the Dome in the beautiful coastal town of Swakopmund. Now, WaterAid is an international not-for-profit organization determined to make clean water, decent toilets, and good hygiene normal for everyone, everywhere. Now, they too are here at the 7th Africa Sanitation Conference, and this morning I'm joined by WaterAid's Pan-Africa Program Manager, Ms. Dedo Mate-Kodjo. This morning.
Thank you. Good morning to you too.
How have you been? How have you been finding the week here in Swakopmund?
Very, very interesting. Yeah. Very intense, but very encouraging as well.
Very much indeed. Yeah. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Ms. Kodjo, of course, you form part of this important conference on sanitation and hygiene on the African continent. First and foremost, what are your impressions of this conference before we get into the work of WaterAid?
Okay. You know, the Africa Sun Conference is the 7th edition, right?
Yes.
And we have been systematically involved last X number of years. Progressive movement, right? Progressive engagement by all and sundry in the process, because we have an agenda ahead of us to improve water, sanitation and hygiene conditions for African people in line with Agenda 2063.
Yeah.
So I think it's been very, very good, very encouraging.
Very much indeed.
We are challenging each other on the issues as well. You know, why aren't we moving fast enough? And what does it take to move, to get to the point where we all want to get to?
And you raise a very valid point. You know, it's encouraging to hear that, you know, so many leaders are coming together, putting their heads together to, of course, find solutions to this problem. But somehow there seems to be, we're not moving at the desired pace. What do you think could be the reason for that?
A number of reasons, and I think that the reasons have been echoed in a number of the sessions that we've had this week. Fundamentally, we are coming from a place far below everybody else, if I may put in those terms, because we've got the Sustainable Development Goals, but the starting point is not the same for everyone.
Africa is always at the back foot, so to say.
Well, come to think of it, not everyone in Africa, even there, it's not a homogeneous statement. So we have to pace ourselves, but at the same time encourage each other to move ahead. And I think that's the importance of the Africa Sun movement, because it's not just a conference. It is a series of events that lead to the conference, and then there's some accountability measures that we put in place at every African Sun. And then, you know, it results in some monitoring at country level. It results in the Ngor Declaration report, which now people use to measure our progress. But I think fundamentally governments are engaged. We need a bit more creativeness, innovation around how we use the limited funding we have to push the agenda.
Very much so. Talk to us about the work of WaterAid and your contributions, your initiatives towards hygiene improvement on the African continent here.
Okay, so WaterAid, I mean, you mentioned quite a bit of opening, but we are a federation of seven countries, 7 entities. We've been operating for the last 41 years.
Wow.
And our very first program in Africa was in Zambia.
Nice.
Right. Nice. At the moment, the work in Africa constitutes about 61% of all our international programs.
Wow.
So that's a big investment.
Big focus on Africa.
Yes. Big focus on Africa, because this is where the needs are. We have been working primarily in a lot of sectors. When we started, we were service delivery. Let's show how it can work in tandem with the government and with the donors and with the communities.
Very much.
So it's been a long journey. On water, sanitation, hygiene. We did some work with wash and healthcare facilities. You know, that was a major piece of work that we did that contributed to the World Health Assembly Declaration on wash and healthcare facilities in 2019. And that we've worked with a number of governments, Ministry of Health, communities, to ensure that there are models for supplying water, sanitation, hygiene in a sustainable way.
In a sustainable keyword.
Sustainable way at the healthcare facility, but not just there, in schools, and then by default into communities as well.
Very much so. And of course, we always see, the underscoring of the rural area and informal areas as well, that really need sanitation and hygiene services. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so because we're an NGO, we definitely work through partners. So policy formulation with government,
Yes.
implementation through the local authority.
Yes.
So we had some local authorities here over this week,
Yeah.
local authority and at the community level. So every community every district or region that we go into, we assess the situation with our local government authorities,
Yes.
and then we plan exactly what we want to do. So in lots of cases, we have provided models for water, sanitation, hygiene in schools,
Yeah.
water, sanitation, hygiene in hospitals, in healthcare centers, and at the same time, looking at the policy environment. So helping government to review the policy environment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And oftentimes, how challenging does policy make it to bring sanitation closer to people? Yeah?
Well, the policy is there.
Yeah.
I think some of the intricacies of that. So, for example, is it gender sensitive? Are we really targeting the most vulnerable?
Yes.
And are we going that last mile to ensure that everyone everywhere gets access to clean water, sanitation and hygiene?
Very much.
Invariably, we work with, like I said, local authority.
Yes.
So we have a plan. There are lots of NGOs working in that sector at the local authority level, but we work in tandem,
Yes.
and we ensure that there's a lot of coordination in the work that we are doing.
Very much.
Yeah.
You've briefly highlighted some of your successes, and quite a lot of successes. I
Yes.
can imagine over 41 years, of WaterAid. But if you could perhaps, highlight some of the latest, innovations, as you rightfully put it, towards your approach to sanitation. We know the issue of financing is a problem,
Yes.
especially for NGOs. I can imagine how much more difficult it
Yes.
must be for you guys, etc. But what would you say have been some of your biggest success stories of late? Ways that you found, to sustainably bring these services, sustainably help people have sanitation.
Okay,
closer.
I was going to talk about the our big projects.
Yeah.
So, for example, we've done some work in Ethiopia
Yes.
around 20 towns, providing water, working through the local authority, working through the utility to have piped warm water sustainably, and integrating climate resilience into that as well. So that's one part. In other levels, we work with the communities for their own self-advocacy through a process we call indigenous advocacy or human rights-based approaches, where they get engaged with the local authorities to make the necessary demands. So that's one. Secondly, we've been looking at the issue of finances and recognizing that we need to look at how to unlock financing at the community level, at local level, and perhaps, of course, with government. And then working in tandem with the major international finance institutions, the development banks, to see how, on the playing field, water, sanitation, hygiene, and climate resilience WASH can be addressed through the funding.
Very much so. What would you say are the biggest challenges, the biggest barriers towards your work here? We know that, in Africa, you also find a lot of situations where you have conflicts in a lot of parts of the world. You have drought, you have famine, a lot of, natural disasters across the continent. I'm sure these prove a lot of, perhaps very challenging for you in the work that you do.
I'm glad you talked about that, because over the years as well, we've decided to look at how we can integrate water, sanitation, hygiene into climate. And so the conversations over the last few years have been, how do we work with national governments to include issues of water, sanitation, hygiene in their national development plans, in their national determined contributions and national action plans for climate change, and then linking that with all the other development plans.
Very much indeed.
Supporting them to do that and make sure that it looks what it looks like on the ground through resilience. How do you keep communities resilient? Because flooding, droughts, etc., will happen all the time.
Very much.
And people must be able to bounce back. And bouncing back means having the fundamentals, water, and of course sanitation that goes along with it.
Very much indeed. On the issue of conflicts on the African continent, we know that in Eastern DRC, we're seeing conflict right there, right now. We know we've seen coups in West Africa, an area that you're from yourself. When it comes to the works of, NGOs, of providing sanitation services close to the people.
It's always been a challenge. And this is where sometimes, okay, we don't work in humanitarian contexts, but we do provide technical support, to some of the cluster conversations. For example, when the famine in Ethiopia recently, we were part of the conversations at government level on how to provide water, sanitation, and hygiene. But it does form a risk for everybody. How do you access the communities in situations like this? And I think, when we say this here, of course, the UN peacekeeping does help in certain contexts, but where they are not, then it becomes a real big challenge. And most unfortunate that, when there are conflicts, the first thing that is required is water and sanitation, because people have to move if they're going to be internally displaced, or if there's flooding, and things, systems are overrun. That becomes a very major problem. Yeah.
Very much indeed. Ms. Kodjo, going forward, what would you like to see as far as the sanitation and hygiene provision on the African continent is concerned, and also going forward, what are some of the initiatives of WaterAid?
Okay, so 2 questions there. We've talked a lot this week about the statistics, the challenges of that. And some of the recommendations coming from some of the working groups have been, we need that commitment, financial commitment, not just a commitment on paper, but commitment that is, taken forward into action and tracked. So there are a number of frameworks that our national governments are aware of that helps to cost, look at the costing of provision of water and sanitation hygiene, providing the money towards that and tracking it, so that 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, we can say we've spent X amount of money in WASH and we've been able to provide X, moving the dial towards safely managed sanitation, good hygiene, water, as per the SDGs 2030 and beyond. Now for WaterAid, over the last, we launched a new project, a new strategy, in 2022, so the Global Strategy 2022 to 2032, where we're looking at 4 key areas. How do we look at the situations at subnational level, model, carry out advocacy and influencing for scale up? That's the first thing. Second, continue to look at WASH in healthcare facilities, looking at climate resilience WASH, and then finance. And in tandem with our partners, with government and the funding institutions, we want to be able to contribute, work towards, reaching 400 million more people, have access to water, sanitation, hygiene, and then to raise $50 billion over the next 10 years towards the sector. And I think, some of the conversations that we're having this week around, financing for the sector are, leading to that kind of contribution.
Ms. Kodjo, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed Namibia. I hope you enjoyed Swakopmund, and that you do get time to look around a bit.
I'm certainly signing up for a lot of things. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. There you have it. That was WaterAid's Pan-Africa Program Manager, Ms. Dedo Mate-Kodjo. They're here at the 7th Africa Sanitation Conference as well. And as you heard there, they continue with their work towards sanitation and hygiene services to people on the African continent. Of course, the issues around financing key matters they're looking to work towards as well. Launched a new project running at 10 years last year, 2022, up until 2032. And also just calling on everybody to please play their part there as they can. If you're wondering what is the Africa Sanitation Conference, well, the following video gives you a pretty good idea of what exactly it is. So stay tuned.